impact of electrification for mobile applications. So hopefully everybody can hear me. I'm not muted. I think we're good to go.
I think we are.
Okay. So a little bit about myself. So I started my first company back in 2002. We actually commercialized and developed a line of handicap access pool lifts that was specifically to get disabled individuals in and out of pools and spas. Then I took, I gotta use my mouse and hold on. It's always technical difficulties. So then I took a little break from running a company and became an applications engineer for a fluid power distributor on the West Coast. And really that's where I started understanding a lot of the intricacies of fluid power, how the fluid power industry works, distribution, sales channels, products, and really started seeing that in terms of electrification, there was some missing components of technology that we needed to provide our customers, and that led me to found Terzo Power Systems in 2014. And we actually developed a line of fully integrated electro-hydraulic smart pumps. Specifically, our biggest use case was steering on battery electric commercial trucks. We started deploying this. These are deployed on thousands of vehicles across the globe with some of the largest truck manufacturers. And one example, this is actually one of the steering units. This is I think, an 11 kilowatt unit, 800 volts, and it provides all of the hydraulic flow and pressure for, as you can see, a Mack truck, a battery electric truck. This was at a trade show several years ago. But throughout that process with Terzo Power Systems, I really started seeing that we were focused on providing a key component, but there were still some things that we had to do in terms of the whole system for electrification. So that really led me to, after the sale of Terzo Power Systems back in 2022, I started Zero with the specific focus of developing the whole system for electrification of heavy equipment. That includes advanced thermal management, electrohydraulics, and our e-engine for heavy-duty applications. So today, I'm actually going to give you some takeaways first, so you can sort of just think about those while we're going through some of the other stuff. And then I think it's a really good idea to have a good historical understanding of electrification and fluid power. Then I'm going to talk about the market drivers in electrification. Why do we have them? What are they? And why are they really important to understanding the impacts that we've seen over the last 5, 6, 7 years, and then also what we're going to see in the future. I'm going to talk briefly on the market and sales channels, how they've changed slightly. Then I'm going to go into the impacts to the fluid power distribution industry that electrification has had, and then how you can sort of adapt and capitalize going forward for the next decade. So here's, if you take away anything from this presentation, here's sort of the 3 highlights. In terms of technology, electrification is sort of uninteresting for fluid power distribution, and at best is actually a distraction. And I'll go into that a little bit down the road. But also electrification is unmatched in terms of the opportunity that it provides for fluid power distributors and the whole fluid power industry. And then the impacts are astronomical. There are huge impacts, but the solutions to capitalize on those are actually really quite simple. So first of all, what does electrification mean? Of course, it means something different to everybody you talk to. There's different terms, there's different, it's just a very vague term. If you look at aviation, electrification doesn't really mean anything, because everything that could possibly be electrified already has been electrified over the last 40, 50 years. In terms of fluid power, anything that they could get rid of fluid power and replace with direct electric, they've already done so. So aviation, actually, electrification is sort of not interesting, but it's really interesting when we look at it in terms of a roadmap. it's really the best example of how we can say, okay, what have they done on and this primarily commercial aviation, what have they done on fluid power systems, and you can almost bet that that's going to either be adopted in short order or in the future into other industries. I'm not really going to talk about military and defense and industrial. I'm going to focus more on mobile for this presentation. But when you look at electrification, what it means, who knows? So it really, we're all on a different page. But what we should be asking is, what does electrification mean to the fluid power industry? What does it mean to fluid power distributors? What does it mean to your company and your customers? I mean, that's what's in it for me is the question that everybody really needs to understand. So if we look at what electrification means for the fluid power industry, really what electrification means for fluid power industry is everything. It will actually affect in a positive way every single metric that we deal with in a fluid power system. For example, I put some of them down here, but this is not an exhaustive list because it's everything. I mean, we are going to get better efficiency, better control, better productivity, lower noise, less oil, better predictability, you name it. Electrification means this for the whole industry. What it means to the fluid power distributors is not much. It's actually just another opportunity. And I think that's something that I'll talk about a little bit, throughout this presentation is we get caught up in a lot of the electrification hype in all kinds of different ways. But to fluid power distributors, it's just another opportunity like every other opportunity that distributors have approached. But it is the opportunity of a lifetime for sure. And it's slightly different, but not all that different from what we've been doing in the industry for a long time. What it means to your customers is the exact same thing of what it means to the fluid power industry. It means your customers will be able to improve almost every metric of their fluid power system on their machines or vehicles. But like everything else, there's always a caveat. And in our case, the devil is in the details of the application. I mean, we are an application-driven industry. And really the only way you can capitalize on electrification in any significant and long-term fashion. I'm not talking about, a science project that we work on, and and I say we as fluid power distributors because I worked in the distribution for quite a few years, and but we as distributors actually we get caught up in a lot of garage projects and science projects in terms of electrification. But what we really need to do is we want to capitalize and find long-term projects. And we have to deeply understand that application. But honestly, that's like if I gave you a book that says, how to lose weight, and it just says, eat less and exercise. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. This has been the strength of distributors since they were, the inception of distributors is deeply understanding their customer and the specific application. I mean, that's the strength. And that's why the electrification is actually less interesting than I think we give it less interesting than it should be, or more interesting than it should be. Okay, so now from a historical, fluid power technology standpoint, if we look at, and again, I want to give sort of a background about a lot of electrification within fluid power, because the electrification era that we're in right now is no different than a bunch of these other electrification eras, because the impact is the same. How we deal with them are the same. So I think understanding the historical, background of our industry is really important. So if we look at, the World War II, I think it was the P-38 Lightning and the Mitsubishi Zero were notoriously underpowered on their control authority on some of their control surfaces on those airplanes. Well, the issues that they had with those airplanes in World War II directly led to the development of the electrohydraulic valve in 1950, 51, 52. And that allowed them more precise and powerful hydraulic control of valves. So World War II was the event, and the technology enabler was electrohydraulic valves. And we see the same thing with the space race. It directly led to the development of transistors, microprocessors, and lithium-ion batteries. in actually pretty short order, 70, 71, 72. All of those happened at once. And, we see the same thing today, is that low cost computing power really is our technology enabler. We don't really know how AI tools are going to play into this whole thing. I think there's still a huge question mark on that. And it's not even going to be very clear for quite a while. So what does this really mean? Electrification has allowed us, throughout all of these developments of these electrified components, have just allowed us to gain a greater bit of control over our fluid power system. Going back to the valve position and pump stroke with the electrohydraulic valve, that electrification allowed us to gain control over those metrics. And you see that as we have progressed over the last 60, 70 years, electrification has just allowed us at every step to gain greater and greater control over our hydraulic system. And, in 20 some years ago, we actually gained electronic control over control with ECUs that we could actually program. We could bring input, sensor inputs in and outputs. We actually gained electronic control of control. Now we have electronic control of information and the power source. But what's really interesting is if we look at allowing control of our fluid power system going forward, electrification is actually going to allow us to control how efficient the system is, how light and cost effective it is, and what is the performance. And that's all metrics of the system that we are gaining control over with electrification. So what does that mean in terms of hardware and software and service products that we sell, through distribution? Really, hardware, we're really familiar with all the things that we sell in fluid power. Each enabler has allowed us to, plug in another hardware product. And same thing as smart pumps are now starting to be plugged in as hardware products. Service products, distributors really provided system knowledge at the beginning. They knew the hydraulic system, and that was their service that they were selling. We're not really clear from what I've seen on what is there's quite a bit of discussion on this in the industry. What is the service that electrification is bringing to the table for distributors to sell? I think it's still a question mark. I don't think we really understand what actual products there are in the service side, which is why we see that talked about quite a bit in the industry. And same on software. We've never, in the fluid power industry, we've been definitely more of a hardware game. We've had some software tools, programming tools, recently with telematics dashboards, but we still have a whole bunch of question marks when it comes to what are the actual products that we have to sell as a result of electrification. So I'm going to go into market drivers now. And I think this is where electrification in fluid power really starts to get interesting in how we understand, and react to, electrification. So I break everything up into indirect market drivers and direct market drivers. Indirect events, politics, and availability, are all indirect market drivers. Like I was talking about in World War II, that was an event market driver that led to the development of electrohydraulic valves. Same thing right now. Politics as a market driver in electrification is huge. Obviously, I mean the political drivers are in overdrive right now. I mean, it is really pushing a lot of the electrification in the last 10 to 15 years. I'm actually going to tell you that that's not going to be the case going forward, but that's not going to slow down electrification trends because it's a different game now going forward. And then availability, really the cost. I mean, we can get these products. They're available for a cost point, and that is definitely a driver of electrification. And then the most important is direct drivers. These are customer-driven needs that push us to electrify different things. And automation is probably the best example. Customers need automation to deal with a lot of their staffing and skills and labor shortages, their increased, or reduced available footprint for space. There's a lot of reasons that are driving the automation, but it is driving, it has driven like all of the sensor development over the last 10, 20 years. So market drivers, I think, and this is a very quick snapshot on market drivers, but understanding what is driving the development of solutions in our industry, I think is hugely important. So we're sort of actually looking at this point in time, we're sort of looking at something I think pretty unique actually. We have all market drivers right now, all coinciding at the same time. We have all the event market drivers. We have all the hype that we hear, which regardless of what is hype and what is not, it drives a lot of action. It drives a lot of takes. It is moving a lot of things in our industry, even if it is just hype. We see all the political market drivers. We have the availability market drivers. You can make an argument on any one of these being the most important. But right now we have low cost and powerful software and hardware like we've never seen, like no human has actually ever seen. We have reasonable battery costs. They're not great, but we also have a mature knowledge base. We have access to information about everything, and that's just accelerating with AI and ChatGPT and the refinement of those AI tools. And then we have all of the customer market drivers available. The customers need everything. They need automation, energy savings, more performance. They need an advantage against their customers. They need cost reduction. They need it all. So what this means is we have low cost hardware and software. We have everything, right? I mean, we have all of these market drivers all coming together with the perfect storm. So moving on, I'm just going to talk about sales channels really quickly because I think there's a couple little interesting things to take away from in terms of electrification. So traditionally, obviously for large OEMs, they have a whole tiered supplier system that is difficult for distributors to inject themselves into and provide value. That's why distributors really the mainstay is smaller OEMs where they work with integrators, designers, and directly with the OEM to provide the solution in terms of services, products, or software. But with electrification, it's changed a little bit. And this is something that I saw, very clearly with my last company is one of the greatest disruptions that we saw was the disruption in the sales channel. And I think what it's done is it's changed the sales channel with bigger OEMs. And what that does is it allows distributors, in a lot of cases, to actually provide value, inject themselves into that sales channel where they wouldn't have been able to before. Because the OEMs have outsourced their e-mobility teams to, examples of Pratt Miller, and they have built their own internal e-mobility team. So this now has provided, a lot of different ways in other than just the standard purchasing RFI, RFQ process. And that has opened the door for distributors, suppliers, I think like we haven't seen in maybe forever as far as the large OEMs. For small OEMs and medium OEMs, really nothing has changed. I think it's the same process, just because you're more in touch with the people that are actually making the decisions at those OEMs. So what does that mean? So what do we have in terms of impacts of fluid power electrification? What we have now is, I was just sort of talking about a lot of these things. We have an equal playing field in terms of technology. Everybody has it, and everybody has what everybody else has. So nobody really has much of a technology advantage, and that's why I sort of said previous is that it's technology is sort of uninteresting to distribution and fluid power because. It was one thing if there was different technology, access to different people for different channels. Now everybody has access to everything, whether they know it or not. They might not have access to the information that they have, the information that they can get anything, but we all have it. We have this perfect storm of market drivers. I think that is It's absolutely amazing because that has been pushing all of this absolutely amazing energy and craze and hype, and we have all of these market drivers. And we do have opportunity for distributor growth through those changing sales channels, in a lot of different ways, but not through electrification. It's because of electrification. Again, electrification in and of itself is not interesting. It's just provided different opportunities for distributors. And then something going forward that I'll talk about, which is this emerging system 2.0. And I'll go into that a little bit. I'll talk a little bit forward looking, not just the here and now, in terms of what I see as a technology developer. Okay, so a lot of this will be a little bit controversial, but this is from my 25 years in the industry and developing technology for fluid power. We do not have an existential threat from electric replacement of hydraulics. I think for the most part, aviation has proven this. That is something that's the Ford versus Chevy conversation that we hear at every trade show. It's topic. I think the fluid power industry is doing themselves a disservice by even worrying about that. And I could go into that for a couple hours just in the physics involved and why that's not the case. It's actually the reverse. I actually think we're going to take fluid power is actually going to take market share from electric. We don't have batteries. Whatever it is, we do not have batteries that have the cost, energy density, power density, charging capacity. They just don't exist that can power anything except the smallest compact equipment. And that's on an application by application basis. If you can even say that that's a viable solution, there are certainly applications that make sense, but on the broader sense, the batteries just are not up to the task for the off-highway market. Hybrids are a different story. All hybrids utilize batteries, but a typical hybrid might only need a couple kilowatt hours of battery pack, 5 kilowatt hours. You have a lot more flexibility on what kind of chemistry to go with. You can go with safer chemistries. It's just not the same conversation around batteries. So hybrids are a different story when it comes to battery cost and energy density. Hydrogen technology. This is talked about a lot, but in terms of distributors, it's sort of there's not a lot of impact that it will have to distribution. So that part of electrification, it may never impact the distributor side because of how it's actually being marketed. We don't really have any autonomous solution. Automation, again, I make this distinction every chance I get between automation and autonomy. Automation we've been doing for a long time. Automation is growing fast. Electrification and automation is an absolutely great place to be. But if you're working on projects that are autonomous, either that's a bad business model or they don't understand what autonomous means. So it's up to you as the distributor to understand what's driving that and either understanding that they're using the terminology incorrectly, or it's an automation project, or it truly is they're trying to do autonomous. And if Tesla hasn't done it in 20 years and billions of dollars, high likelihood a smaller OEM is not going to be able to achieve that. Again, these are all very sort of contentious discussions on this slide, but we don't really have any cost-effective way to recover energy. I hear that a lot. I hear it a lot of, okay, why don't we include energy recovery from a falling gravity load on some hydraulic system? Yes, we can always do that, but there is no cost-effective way to add that in. And every time you look at that, the cost of benefit does not actually make any sense. So I think that's not something that distributors really have access to. I don't across the board. And predictive maintenance, again, all of these things are tossed about in the electrification world. All these topics on this slide are tossed about in electrification. And, I think that this is all part of sort of the hype that we need to, start pushing aside so we can focus on the true growth and the true opportunities of electrification in fluid power. So yeah, so let's talk about solutions in the electrification of fluid power. So again, it's a lot of this is really uninteresting. Going back to the basics, ignoring technology hype, focusing on direct market-driven solutions, just slightly tweaking your sales channel, and then sort of understanding just so you know what's coming down the road, coming down the pipe over the next 5 or 10 years. Start to understand System 2.0. It's going to be quite a few years before it impacts distribution, but it will definitely impact and provide opportunities to the distributors. So on the ignoring the technology hype, again, I'm not going to go into this too much, but really understanding e-mobility, the electric, takeover conversation, autonomy versus automation, understanding this and what's actually behind, any given project is extremely critical on the success or failure of electrification projects in fluid power. Focusing on, I think the easiest way to just cut through everything in electrification is just look at the market driver and only focus on direct market drivers that are driving a given project, because we've seen that time and time again that is where, it's sort of been a bloodbath in a lot of the EV, markets lately in the last, year, 2 years. That was pretty obvious coming because it's all of the poor business models and projects and vehicles that were not driven off of the correct market drivers that are falling to the waysides. At the same time, other projects that do have the correct automation-driven, energy-driven, performance-driven, energy, not political. So, that's a big distinction on energy savings-driven projects versus it's just trying to capitalize on a political market driver like incentives or something like that. That is fundamentally different than when we see an energy savings-driven project. So, again, this is probably the key, focusing on direct market drivers. So what are we actually seeing right now in actual application and projects? So small and medium mobile equipment, 25 to 200 horsepower. We are not seeing anything that is pure EV. There is just too much physics that gets in the way of trying to power that kind of equipment with pure batteries. Hybrid only, and then even that is just in its nascency. It's very early days on small, for hybridization. Compact mobile equipment, less than 25 horsepower. We're seeing some success on pure EV, but that's really application specific and few and far between, honestly, on compact equipment. Even though everybody just keeps saying like, oh, all compact equipment is going to be electrified, that's not the case that we're seeing. Where we are seeing like absolutely astounding growth is ground, all of these ground support vehicles, port material handling vehicles, AGVs, short haul bus and transit. These are all really good direct market drivers are behind all of these. You look at why they're being electrified and how they're being they are very strong business cases across the board. And I tell everybody it's exactly the same thing when we look at forklifts. If you look at it's sort of like aviation. We look to these historical things as roadmaps to predict the future, and forklifts are the prime example. No business is buying electric forklift for anything other than a direct market driver. They are not buying electric forklift for global warming, for anything other than it pencils out on cost effectiveness for moving pallets around their facility. Same thing with all of these. They just pencil out for buses. Most buses are going to be electric because most buses travel less than 75 miles a day. and return to the same home. So it makes sense on how you actually apply that electrification, you know, that how you evaluate that electrification opportunity. So where we're really seeing almost non-existent electrification is obviously in large equipment, variable duty cycle machines, any large utility and forestry. There's just limited to non-existent opportunities there. And again, a lot, this is in reference to distribution. It's slightly different, for direct, but not all that different, quite honestly. So just a quick example of actual impact of electrification on the market recently. So this is something that I'm really familiar with. So quiet gear pumps have been around for decades. We've all known about it, but most people really didn't have a good use for them because why you would use that in a project doesn't have the correct market drivers. Then enter the EV side, and when you take away the engine or shut off the engine in terms of a hybrid, now the hydraulic pump is absolutely the loudest thing on that vehicle. And across the board, almost all of these vehicles overnight had to go to a quiet helical gear pump, and that saw an amazing market growth like within 1 or 2 years. So it's interesting, and there's a lot of examples like this. So it's, again, I don't think this is actually a technology that is that is completely mind blowing or amazing, but it's the right drivers that are pushing this. So here's a good example of my previous company. So if you see right there, that is the steering pump with a quiet helical gear. And these are over in Europe, and yeah, they're moving these by, there's thousands and thousands of vehicles that are battery electric going out every year now. And I think this year there's going to be 30,000 electric buses going out globally, short haul, a lot of this. So it's a real opportunity. There's real things going on, real opportunities for distributors. And again, in some of these applications, there's really good distributor opportunities. So key takeaways, really electrification is just giving you some more tools in your tool belt, a couple more products that are coming online. But really, electrification is not changing things in any significant manner when we're talking about distribution. It has provided, or it does demand a faster response, I think, than traditional distribution. But that's only compared to right now. That's compared, over the last 5 years, the responsiveness of everything across the board has actually slowed down. So compared to now, much faster response is required to capitalize on electrification opportunities. Electrification does provide huge growth opportunities for distributors, but only if you react to the direct market drivers. And I can attest that electrification is real, significant, and impactful. It's not if it's off the wrong market driver. It's going to be a black hole, or a never-ending hole of money. You're just throwing into this hole if you're working on the wrong projects. So I'm going to go over really quickly the System 2.0, just sort of forward-looking stuff, some stuff that we're working on, other companies, and again, this is how electrification is moving. Is actually now starting to define these new products. When I talked earlier about the historical development of products, we are now in this System 2.0 where new products are emerging and will be matured over the next 5 to 10 years. But again, as far as distribution, that most of those don't really make sense to sell through distribution because they're heavily customized with OEMs. We're seeing that change pretty quickly. So I think in the next couple of years, a lot of these products will be moving through distribution. But most everything's going to dedicated electrohydraulics for efficiency and control. Integration is the name of the game. If you look at, say Cascadia, Borg Warner's systems. For commercial trucking, they're integrating inverters, motors, cooling, pumps. Same thing with RE Engine, where we're integrating virtually everything you can integrate. Parker's EPTO is a good example as well. There's not a lot of examples out there, but we're just starting to see these come on board. Let's see. So if we look at the sort of the hardware, software, and application environment of the System 2.0, what we see is hardware today. What we're seeing in terms of hardware, 1.0 is what I'm calling just sort of the hardware we have right now, whether it's legacy hardware, what have you. That still has it has a long tail, of course, but we're not really we might be close to the peak, but we're still, there's another 10 years of hardware innovation to the existing 1.0. And we're just beginning to see 2.0 hardware innovation come online, and it's not going to peak for a long time. So we're just at the really, really, really infancy stage of hardware innovation for electrification. If you consider 1.0 pre-electrification hardware, 2.0 built for electrification, we're still in very, very early days. Software innovation is actually, there's almost an indistinguishable merge from 1.0 to 2.0 and into who knows AI 0.0 down the road. But this is where I think distributors are going to have the opportunities in application innovation. This is probably the almost exclusive domain of fluid power distributors. So I think the ability for distributors to come up with the really innovative applications for their customers is actually on the wane if you're looking at today. But we're starting to see that being innovative in how you apply these products for electrification is going to be a really steep growth opportunity. It's going to be a long-term growth, and we're not anywhere near the peak. So I think really understanding the application innovation, which is why earlier I said the devil's in the details on the application. It is where you can throw a lot of money down a deep, dark hole, or it's where you can ride a growing wave of 2.0 without worrying about technology or anything. All you're doing is looking at the application and being very innovative in how we're providing that solution to the OEM customers. So I think this encapsulates a lot. So if you look at adoption by product, again, this is sort of nebulous. I don't really dive into the numbers because I work in just looking at the whole market and getting a gut feel of where technology is, where it's going, where it came from, versus trying to, you really, to understand the numbers, you have to go through so many different opinions of the size of the market, the sales, and I look at trends. And the trends of variable piston pumps, I think if it is a waning product for mobile. Why I say that is, one, they're very loud. So piston pumps are very, very loud. It's same issue of the other hydraulic pumps. They had to go to quiet helical gear pumps. Piston pumps, when you shut off the engine, they actually sound like a diesel engine a lot of the times. And they don't provide the opportunity to capitalize on all of the benefits electrification offers. And that seems sort of counterintuitive, I think, because a lot of applications in the last 5 to 10 years have been, let's throw electric motor right here, and we have an electrified machine. And we have seen that that's not been super successful. So it's on its waning time. And again, this is relative in time in terms of years. But if you look at fixed displacement, I think it's going to enter. It's not even to its peak yet. There probably was some bumps and stuff before here, but we are now, I think, going into the golden years of fixed, the really amazing years of fixed displacement pumps. Something that has been ubiquitous and uninteresting for decades is now becoming the star of the show, because there's so many different ways because they're cost effective, they're simple, robust, and they do everything we need. Yes, I can hear people thinking in their brains like they're volumetrically inefficient, whatever. There's many reasons why that's almost not even doesn't even enter into the equation on why they're the preferred pump. Valves again are in their waning infancies because again this is the biggest. We lose all our energy right here. This is where 70% of our energy in a system is lost. The other big bucket is in the piston in the large variable volume pumps, and I think hoses and fittings are also on the decline. I could go into a lot of the things that are replacing these, but it's not actually very interesting. It's electric motors, inverters, and a lot of controls. But a modern electrohydraulic power on demand system has 90% less hoses and fittings on it. Industrial, I'm not really going to discuss any of the industrial today. So I think that about wraps up my discussion. I wanted to make sure I left enough time for any kind of questions. I didn't want to run too long, and I invite anybody to either jump on and ask questions or put your questions in the chat. But until then, I think that's about all I got.
Thanks so much, Mike. We'll wait and see if there are any questions. I'm not hearing any. So unless anyone has any questions, we'll wrap it up.
All right. We'll give you 15 minutes of your life back. It looks like we're a little early.
Love that. All right. Thank you again, everyone, for attending today. We look forward to seeing you at either the November or December or both webinars. Thank you. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thanks a lot, Kathy.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.